Nimbola. Pula Vinaka vakalevu na sema mai na nanda Talanoa and I kabi Vinaka ni signi kua. Vinaka vakalevu ikimni na vakaroronga tiko mai. Unitaka ni rongo Vinaka tiko yani na bioliba ni Talanoa and programungo ni Talanoa with Dr. T. Pabili Vinaka tiko ni vakalevu ikimni na vakamure tiko mai na Talanoa e vakatiko na loma ni madho kedengo. Sa marongo ni sa semaromingo na nanda hulangi. Vunga vikimni o ni santo reida na kena I vola tukutuku beauty ko na mona liba member leta tiko na vola. Da marutaka na madongo vakana numitiko kina na ni katini ni ambaki ni kenando vakana numitiko na madao ni wasa vakaviti. Fijian language wika teka butek menisilandi na ambaki ronondo lutili katolu. Na ambaki ngosa katini ni ambaki au saga na numa mi usuriti remai so na nondando bola o irna nondando vakandindike mera mai Talanoa takamatanga na daba ba kongetira mera bola. Unitaka ni rongo Vinaka tiko yani vikimni na nero na mai sema patatiko ni kua ke Mary Rokonadravu and sigo Vinaka ngo sema sarti ngamoko and vakalevu Iowa. And ngai pakamadala tako koe tiko ibe o Iowa na bonongo e Amerika. O maro tako koe tiko mbeka na tokalao ke Amerika o eu tiko na asa vakara. O maro taka ni kromi sema bate ni kua. Ena nerua na vuda tiko mai me ngole mo koe me Talanoa tu manda weekend. Vunga vikimni sa wilika na kena I Talanoa na nisi veva so beka vikimni sa sarava na nona do vaktarongi na mona liba se ena retio yalo. Ia au sama ruta kasar ni sa ngole me ngo koe mena mai Talanoa weekend ia me bakanga keni bala vikimni na sando vakmuretu mai na nongo program and na rongo da mandango endo na sere. Na sere ngo na kuti kenta sara kina yanu totoka o ovalau ene sana wakaturanga o loma I viti. Na ngoni maramongo o Mary Rokonadravu avuli ka susu takatalanga mai ena tau ni totoka na koro makawa ke viti. Au na numakina mena langa mata na serengo na sere membale televuka kala ngata tiko weekenda o Jimmy Subaidas. Vinaka vakalevu na sema mai unitaka ni na marutaka na serengo.
Sai levo cana ao nono na vez la saquete na ugo tu mai era bem na Veicinha que levuka Veiva tuloa Kakoro makawa Sevana vei biau Kei viti eloma Não ando mudo na quena da caule ni no bacalma e macare tu feia o amor na Ruita mi candina Vea Veiva tuloa Kahoro makawa Sevana veiviau Kei viti elohoma Nau bandu pongu Na kena da ulali Nino bakama Lali nino bakama
Sa rong Vinaka diri na sero ya. Da babi di Vinaka na nona melanga seritiko o Jimmy Subaidase. Na turanga kililewa na muturarani langa sere. O kilani na da bakarong tiko mokoe na koro makawa melevuka. Da kila Vinaka na turanga ngo. Bunga bikela senta ngwan lalai. Santa rongo da tiko na domona na turanga ngo. San domo kamidandina. Gai rongo Vinaka. O martak malakina. Me langa to ko weekend na sere na saile bukanga me bakana nonda marama bula ngindo kai na silbi na ko Mary Rokonadravu na gai bak madal ta ko na nona isema ki na yano to toko balau baka wasivi na tauni makawa sena kor makawa da klabe na katu na matai ni kor turanga kai viti ole buka men sana baka bula sarang ko bi nonda bula ngo Mary bula Vinaka baka bula matamai beira na nonda baka rorong ti kumendi kwa
Bula Tarisi. Bula Vinaka to you, and thank you for having me on your program. And I think before we talk about anything else, I just wanted to share with everyone that you and I were classmates at USB, and we met, of course, in foundation studies. And then in the first year of degree studies, we were roommates at Second Hall. So we've known each other for quite a while. So I just wanted to say that, so that is clear from the beginning. Yes, yeah. Thank you for having me in your program, Tarisi. Yeah.
So much appreciated. I was waiting for this moment. I knew it's going to come, and I knew anytime soon it'll happen. And I'm so grateful that you accepted the humble invitation coming from this side of the United States to you. And I know you have been doing so much amazing work, in Fiji. And I just want to say congratulations to you, Mary, for the wonderful contribution that you've given to the field of literature. And, I'm not surprised to where you are right now. Going back to our USP days, many of us always admire, your ability to, explain things or even write things for us, to make it clear. Even at the time when you were a student, I was a student, you were a student, and Vinaka vakalevu for that, Mary, and I want to acknowledge that as well for your support, the moral support, you always give us, particularly those of us who are at Second Hall, and I'm sure many of them will be listening as well to our Talanoa this evening or this afternoon for those logging in from Fiji. Dombolo Vinaka Viti, greeting everybody from Fiji. Rakesh Kumar, Mbolo Vinaka, Rudy Tukana, Mbolo Vinaka Nanguleo, Ratu Eroni Lenduandina, Napoleoni Wangatambu, Dombolo Vinaka na Pubale na Wangatambu, Pubale na Ngwane Ali, Vinaka Vakalevu Nando Vito Kori Tukumani, Pubale na Batiratu, Andi Atemala, Vakatalanga Kina, Kibe Memsi Kaulali. Kay ana takayaw binakabaliw na naman to bakarong tikumay and kay binakaniku ono sila talaga nanguna. If any of you have questions for Mary, you're welcome to ask your questions. You can type it on the chat and I'll be happy to ask the question on your behalf to Mary. Mary, perhaps to kickstart our Talanoa today, if you just would like to explain your background, introduce yourself, where you were raised, and maybe the schools that you went to. You mentioned USP, but maybe before USP, many of our listeners would love to know that, Mary. Naka.
Okay, thank you, Tarisi. So, in terms of my background, what I normally share is I come from a mixed heritage. So, biologically, I have indigenous Fijian, Indian, and European settler heritage. That's my background. Now, in terms of upbringing or being raised up, I was adopted by a South Indian family in Fiji, so of Tamil and Telugu background. My dad being Telugu and my mom Tamil, and they had a copra estate on the island of Koro from my mother's side. My dad comes from Lambasa, but I did not get to Lambasa until I was an adult. But that was the background. So to begin with, I would say, so from early childhood and infancy, it was the people of Koro that had a huge impact on me, particularly the Tikinozawa, the villages of Nambasovi, Tavua, and Navanga. And that was early childhood. And then, of course, coming to school, we had a family home in Levuka. So most of us kids were put there for school. And it was my grandmother who looked after us there and an aunt. But it was in Levuka that I first began school. And that was both primary and secondary school. And Tarisi, one of the things that I would also like to share is that in terms of upbringing and on the journey for writing, just as Kalera and other writers have shared previously on your program, there are incredible teachers that I would like to acknowledge today. And I think the first one would be from what was class 1 at the time, and this is Mrs. Vasu, who, and I still remember her. The other one is Sarote Eresito, who is of Rotuman heritage, but she has been involved in poetry in Fiji. That is one, and I normally follow her on social media. And the other two, the other three, I would say, were in high school. So one was Mrs. Swadesh Kumar, who took me for English, of course, and literature in forms, I think forms 2 and 3 and 4. And then the two, I think, who had an incredible impact on me were Suliana Sandis, who is of Levuka, and Sarah Lockington, who is now based in the West. But these were people who had a huge impact on me, developing an interest in stories and in the actual act of writing. And then the other one, of course, is, and I would like to talk about this at the end, but the importance of libraries and librarians. Yeah, they have had an incredible impact on our interest developing as children, and how we carry ourselves into adulthood. So those would be that. But yes, so to cut it short, I come from a mixed heritage, and I suppose that comes out in most of my writing as well.
So Vinaka vakalevu for acknowledging those teachers who had an impact on you. That's a wonderful way to, remember them. And I've got some teachers also connecting in online. Rudy Tukana, she mentioned that Mrs. Sarote Eresito was also her teacher. And Mrs. Vasu was their marching girls instructor. Yeah.
Well, I did marching girls too, so so that's something to share as well. Yes, thank you.
Totoka wakawati Vinaka vakalevu Rudy Tukana for sharing and acknowledging those teachers. Hey, Mrs. Vasu, Sarote Eresito, Mrs. Kumar, Suliana Sandy, and Sarah Lockington. If you are listening in tonight, or your families are connecting in, just a huge Vinaka vakalevu and acknowledgement with all your individual contribution to our guest today, Mary Rokonadravu. Look at what the result of that was to what it is now. And it's interesting, Mary, you mentioned you specifically said early childhood, right? And it's important for us as we grow up, the impact of that the social interaction, the upbringing. Why was it so important to you to highlight that the early childhood time of your life was significant?
Okay. Um, I think because for me, in terms of my writing, I think the little skills and certain senses that you develop in terms of becoming an artist, say a writer, or any form or any profession that you possibly could get into, but particularly for the arts, your ability to sense the world and make sense of it, I think you develop in early childhood. So one way I could say this is in all my writing, for example, most of my descriptions of the world is what I observed as a child. And then I think those skills that we pick up in childhood in terms of sensing the world with your five senses is what you absorb and then carry on with you as you develop into an adult. So, and then the other thing about writing, of course, is there are many famous writers who talk about, who have various quotes about writing and the writing practice itself. And if you listen to most of them or read their interviews, one of the things that you will begin to pick up is, and I found it to be true, and I suppose it applies to many. When you practice as an artist, whether you're a musician, a songwriter, a writer, a poet, or a scriptwriter, for example, most of those sensibilities are what you pick up from childhood, which is why most of us will talk about our grandparents, for example. So for me, there were two things, and I could demonstrate this by sharing that, I think, which is the better way. Growing up in Koro, we had a copra estate, and most of the workers were of Itoke heritage, the words we use now. But that is not what we called them at home, because my parents had built relationships with all of them. So everybody was either, Nana, Tata, Ne, Momo, or Tukai or Mbu, and all of that, So those were the things. So to know ethnic difference, there were no barriers or walls that I would feel. So that was one. And I suppose that is what you take with you into adulthood, both your worldview and your perceptions about other races and all of that. So that was something that had a huge impact on me. And then the second thing, of course, is oral storytelling. We normally say that Fiji does not have a literature, like a written literature. But as Kalera had mentioned earlier in her interview with you, Fiji and, of course, the most of the Pacific Island countries and even indigenous communities in other parts of the world have oral history, which are rich. And you could say that almost all cultures have it, including those in the West. But how is it significant to indigenous people is because we were the ones without an alphabet that became a way of documenting and transferring information and knowledge. And then I would say that in early childhood, whatever you put a child through is what's going to carry him or her. And those skills that you build are usually from infancy to basically preschool up to about class 2 or 3. Your interest and the skills that you pick up for developing into adulthood.
Vinaka vakalevu, Mary. When you were sharing your story, the words or the phrase "formative years" comes to mind, and that's exactly right. When the formative years in the early part of our lives, and that's amazing. Vinaka vakalevu for sharing that, and most of our listeners are enjoying what you're saying. Particularly a few that are connecting now are teachers. So Vinaka vakalevu kamdona sematikumai and Nairobi Talanoa ke Mary. Before we go on to the your Iowa International Writing Program that you are attending right now, I know you studied in Levuka. Was it Levuka Public? I just wanted to make it clear tonight.
Yes, absolutely. It was Levuka Public School. Yeah.
So Vinaka. So shout out to all the ex-scholars of Levuka Public, wherever you are connecting in from. It's just lovely to have one of your ex-scholars from Levuka Public, LPS, Levuka Public School, who is, creating waves and amazing things in the world of literature, not only in Fiji, not only in the Commonwealth, but all around the world. And we're just so proud of Mary's achievement. So from Levuka to Iowa, that's quite a distance, Mary. What made you apply, or were you selected for this fall residency that you're part of right now?
Okay. Thank you for asking me that, Tarisi. So the residency is based on nomination. So you get nominated into it. Basically, your name is put up, and your embassy contacts you. So in my case, it was the U.S. Embassy in Suva that had contacted me for it. And then, of course, it goes to the U.S. State Department, and then to the people here at the University of Iowa, at the Iowa International Writing Program. Now, one of the things, I was not quite aware of the selection process until I came here. So it differs from region to region and country to country, but at least that's the process so far in our country and in our region. The second, so you're nominated first, and then your name and your name and work and all of that is sent to the University of Iowa. Now, just because you're nominated does not mean that you get a place in the IWP. So the final process is what they do here. So apparently they get a lot of applications and nominations from different parts of the world. But over here, they cut it down to a maximum of 35. In some years, they've had only 20 or so. In other years, they've had about 30. This year, we had 35, but then a writer from Palestine, was not able to join us. So we have only about 34. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I think that is important to know is, I think I could talk about it in, later on as well. But yes, so the nomination is actually anonymous. So I wouldn't know the process exactly. But I think what's important in terms of, us writers is knowing that I think, for me, it was a pleasant surprise because sometimes, because writing, as discussed by others, writing is a very lonely activity. Because when you're writing, it's just you, your thoughts, and the story that's emerging for you as you're developing it. And even after publication, even that is a lonely journey, So I think one of the good things that comes out of residencies like this is to know that people think about you or know your work or go through your work and what you've been doing over years and then decide to nominate you. So for me, that was, I think, the most pleasant thing about it. And I have a lot of gratitude to the U.S. Embassy, particularly in Suva, for this. Yes.
And that just got to show that people are acknowledging your contribution, the work you've been publishing, and keep doing that. And I'm sure there will be many more of these residencies that are in front of you.
Yes, and just to add, and I'm hoping that more people from the Pacific and Fiji get to come across, because it's an incredible opportunity. And just quickly, Tarisi, I'm the third person directly from Fiji. Oh. There've been other Fijians in the diaspora who have come to Iowa, but in terms of directly from Fiji and working back at home, it was Siona Miles and Larry Thomas who came 1 year after the other, and that was about 30 years ago. So there's been a gap of about 3 decades before my nomination came through. So I'm the third one. And before coming, I had gotten in touch with both Siona and Larry. So it was good to do that. Yeah. And
Yes, well, that's a nice way that you kind of continue the legacy of being part of the Iowa International Writing Program. And I know it's known worldwide in the field of writing. So wonderful congratulations, to you for your achievement. So you are actually logging in from Iowa right now.
Yes. So we're all
Sadina.
housed, all 34 of us are housed in this hotel on campus. Yeah, so, and of course, the main thing that's happening is writing and also immersing ourselves into the literary and cultural activities. Yes.
And I'm just very curious, like what's your normal day like? Because is it a kind of a heavy duty kind of program, or do they allow you to be free to do your writing and research? How does it work?
Okay. I would put it this way: from basically, a very there's nothing really that exists for writers in Fiji unless you, I think, are linked to USP, FNU, or University of Fiji, where you get probably some writing support. From that environment to come to Iowa, where from day one, I'll give you one example. When I'm in Suva and I want to go to a library, I go to a public library. But the public library does not give me access to digital databases and collections. Here, through the University of Iowa libraries, there are 6 libraries on campus and they're huge. How many books can I take in, us as writers who are here? We can take out 999 books.
Wow.
And the due date is in June next year. So you can keep it as long as you want. And then the other thing is, I know most people, academics, will be familiar with this, but here you do not have to go to the library and carry your books. They come and deliver it to your room in the hotel. So you can have piles of books all around you the whole time you are here. And when you're done with it, you send an email and they will come and collect it again, but they will drop it off here. So what I mean is, from having literally very little access to online, to books and all of that for research, and then the other thing is, you have about several museums here, an art museum, a museum of natural history. So all of these things are open to you as a writer coming in. So they normally encourage us to if you have a project in mind, you can do it. But Tarisi, just to answer your other question,
Yeah.
What does a normal day look like?
Mm-hmm.
It's totally up to you what you do on a day. Let's put it this way. If you come in and you decide not to do any writing, you can do that. You can just immerse yourself in activities and return to your country. If you come in and you decide to write every day, you can do that. So there are only 2 mandatory activities. One is you have to be part of a panel discussion. They have a theme and you have to share. And then the other thing that you have to do is you take part in a reading. And for me, I was part of the panel discussion in week 1. That was in August. So that's completely gone out. And then the reading I had last month, I think, yeah, which was at Prairie Lights, the bookstore that they have in Iowa City. And that's all done. And then apart from that, you can support your colleagues, other writers, and every day, basically, because it's a writing university, every second or third person that you meet is a writer or attempting to write or wanting to become a writer. It's that rich, And it's the first MFA program in creative writing in the US. It was established in, and I have the year here. The Iowa Writers Workshop was established in 1936. The university was set up in 1847. And then the IWP now is 56 years old this year. And it has hosted more than 1,600 writers from across the world, from over 100 countries. And many of these writers have, gone on and won multiple awards. You have some Nobel literature laureates here who came through. So you have this incredible legacy that you become part of, Yeah.
Yes, and we're so happy that we have 3 Fijians who are
Yes.
part of it. Yes, Siona, Larry, and you.
Mm-hmm.
So Vinaka vakalevu and Vinaka as well, on behalf of all of us, to the 3 of you for representing Fiji, and I'm sure there will be others listening in who will be inspired to follow your footsteps. Vinaka vakalevu. Now, tell us a little bit about this city of Iowa. I know it has some kind of recognition, as the UNESCO City for Literature. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that. You've mentioned that every other person you might see is either, an established writer or planning to, eventually be a writer. Yeah, share with us a little bit about the city.
Okay. So yeah, Iowa City is a UNESCO City for Literature. And it's designated to, UNESCO, I think, designates it to a city that that shows evidence of championing literature and writing and the arts. And for me, when I look at it, this is how we should be developing cities in the Pacific. Sometimes you make a decision not to develop the way normal other cities develop around the world, and you take a different track. And this is what Iowa City did. So Iowa City is basically a university city, so everything has been built around the fact that the university is here. And before that, it was the state capital for the state of Iowa. Now, that changed in 1847. In 1847, when the capital moved to Des Moines, the building was given to start a university. The main buildings here, and then now it's over across 1,900 acres or something like that, the size of the campus and the outlay. So from the start, it was built around creative writing and literature, and that legacy continues until today. Now, as a UNESCO City for Literature, when you get the designation, of course, you use it to brand your city and to create programs and bring the world to your doorstep and all of that. In this case, the city already had that legacy. It had that history already. So now the state of Iowa is big on agriculture. So, they have a large agricultural base. Corn, of course, is the main product, and then you have all other associated industries with it. But it's for Iowa City, it's the intellectual space that is important, I think, and the creative space. So you have a public library, you have public libraries, you have bookshops, and the largest, of course, is Prairie Lights. And then I can give you a comparison. So, for example, at USP at the moment, if I'm correct, you have 2 creative writing units. One that you do in second year degree and another one probably in the final year, if I'm correct. Here, the Writers' Workshop was set up as a graduate program, but it is one of the biggest undergrad creative writing degrees that is offered here. So you have kids coming out of high school who can come and pursue a degree in creative writing. And then you have the related employment and industries that grow out of it. So over here, you have the nonfiction workshop, you have translation into many languages. So these are some of the things we benefit from when we come here. So one example I can give is, after coming to Iowa, they go through your work, and then you have the option to be translated. So normally it's foreign writers, like we have writers from Spanish language writers from different countries, German, or also other languages, All of these can be translated into English. And in my case, taking my English work and then translating it into other languages as well. So, for example, it's been translated into Arabic now, and then there's opportunity for other 3 languages as well. But that's what it has, and it being a UNESCO City for Literature, I think you both maintain it, but you also benefit from it as well. And Melbourne, of course, is a city for literature as well in our part of the world.
In our part of the world, man, right there, eh? For cities, in the Pacific to think of, how they want to brand themselves. There's so much, for us to celebrate in the Pacific, because nearly every country, has a uniqueness around them, like Tonga, for example, Nuku'alofa and Apia and Pango, and you name it, all around, the Pacific. This can be something they could take on board. And look, Iowa, has got that mark or that branding, yeah, for literature and
And they,
University of Iowa, the Writing
because,
University.
yeah, and I would put it this way. So basically, for the university, at one time in their history, which is about 1936, you had some very creative people who fought within the university to decide that writing should be a key product, creative writing. And of course, it would not have been supported by other departments or sectors within. You know, we understand what is prioritized over time. For example, in our part of the world, the arts and the humanities, definitely not. And something like creative writing, definitely not. But you had academics who were forward thinking. And because of that legacy, they have the oldest creative writing program in the world. And by the time it came for the UNESCO designation for the City of Literature, all these frameworks had been set, you know, for more than a century, more than 100 years. But it requires people, I think, to believe in something and to actually advocate for it, which is where the role of intellectuals and teachers and educators come in. Yeah.
You know, you just reminded me of the late Epeli Haofa, you know, of his vision for the Oceania Center. You know, maybe, you know, with I think Larry is now at USP, and I'm sure the others who are able to, you know, build on that. I know there's a wonderful set of, you know, creative academics and people who've been in USP. So Vinaka for highlighting that, you know, there's opportunities for the Pacific to learn from this experience that you have. Wow, man, Vinaka vakalevu. Now let's go into the Commonwealth Short Story Prizes. Can you just explain what is that, you know, short story competition that you took part in, and actually, what is the impact of that? Because I remember there was a lot of news and information that was shared with you winning that. Would you like to share it with us, Kerimer?
Okay, so I think one of the things I could say is, if it were not for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, I would not be here. And neither would I have considered, I mean, I would have been writing, but I wouldn't have been putting work out. So I first won the Commonwealth Short Story Prize for the Pacific region in 2015. And I know he doesn't like to be mentioned, but my husband is responsible for that, because I would not send my writing anywhere. I've been writing for about more than 20 years. But you know, you do it as something on the side. But he was the one responsible for that. And I entered the competition and won that year. And then in 2017, I was shortlisted again. And then in 2022, last year, I won again for the short story genre, and for the Pacific region. So that has been the trend. Now, why have I only been entering the Commonwealth Short Story Prize? And it's very easy for me to answer. If you're writing and working at the same time and you're incredibly busy, you will enter the easiest competition that you can find. And the Commonwealth Short Story Competition does not need anything. All you need is an email address, and you load it. It doesn't cost you anything. There are many competitions out there, many that we in Fiji don't qualify for because it doesn't cover us. The Commonwealth one does. Second thing is, it is absolutely free. There are many competitions out there that charge you money. You have to pay an entry fee to actually participate, to submit your story. And this one doesn't. Now, how has it impacted me? I normally share it like this with close friends, you know, and you, I would share it with you, with, you know, Ella and other people from our year. The same things that I have been saying for years, and practically was unimportant to people and no one would listen. I'm saying it now after having won these few competitions, and people now begin to listen. So I think in that way, that has been one of the impact. The second thing is, you are invited to contribute to more collections and anthologies. And that's the second thing. And I think another impact of that is, well, I think one of the things, the strange things for me that I could share is the impact for me has not really been in Fiji. And I think because in Fiji, we do not have a very big reading population. So I think it has been of interest, but only to a certain extent, with people who maybe read or know you, or or something like that. But the impact has been larger for me in terms of opportunities from other countries and in interest in readership. So, like, one of the impact is your stories get to be taught at universities, for example, in the curriculum. And I was sharing with other writers in my group that one of the funniest things that happened to me was I arrived in Iowa, and I had two students at university from South Korea who were writing to me because they were having an argument about what one of my short stories meant, and could I settle the argument for them, because they were having this debate in their class. So, and then the first short story that I won with, Famished Eels, it had more interest in Africa than in Fiji, for example. But the African countries were more interested in that. So these are some of the, I would say, impact. But I will always put it down to this, Tarisi. It doesn't matter what interest you get internationally. In the end, what you hope for is that our own country, that Fiji, develops in a way so that we have a good and healthy readership, and people interested in stories and writing later on. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, Vinaka vakalevu, and it's wonderful to see that because of these awards you've been getting through the Commonwealth Short Story Prizes, it opened that door for you to be here in Iowa.
Yeah.
Vinaka vakalevu. And thanks to Mr. Rokonadravu, Turanganai wherever you are listening in from, I'm sure you're listening right now. Vinaka vakalevu na vitokoni vi Mary. Balatandra kambimbingo na vitokoni may nanonton tui wale saranga Mary o mnanga o tali taka vakalevu nanumrondo vi lomani kena vitokoni lomani vale balatani rauni ole rawate levu naka for you to achieve so much things outside. It all reflects on the support that is coming from within the home, and that is wonderful to see. What a wonderful example. Vinaka vakalevu Mary and Mr. Rokonadravu. Now, before I go on to other questions that I'm going to ask you, I'm just curious, now that you're there in Iowa, are you writing? Are you researching? Or what are your plans? What are you doing right now? I'm just curious.
Okay. Tarisi, I'm sure when your children were much smaller, and if you took them to a toy shop, how they would react, you would remember that. Okay. So I never thought I would actually ever behave like that until I came here. So it's like being a kid again, and in the biggest toy shop that you could ever think of. Or for me, as a lover of books, it's like entering the biggest bookshop in the world and having everything there that matters to you. So how could I put it? I think you can gather from that. Yes. So in terms of what I'm doing, I was just sharing, I think one of the best things that happens in a residency is you get to mix around with other writers and artists. And it's 24/7. You can do it anytime. So we plan meals, we go downtown to eat at restaurants, and you go to coffee shops, you go to bookshops together, and you spend a lot of time sharing. That's one of the biggest gifts of this residency. And you have writers who come from all over the world, and many of them are not writing in English, they're using their own language. And when they come to Iowa, they are being translated. Which is why the work that you do in terms of, Fijian language, Vosavakaviti, is so important. And in my first panel discussion, I talked about it, the languages of the Pacific, and about the issue of translation, how important it is. And I think that's one of the biggest, most significant development in terms of USP, how it's strengthening its linguistics, Language Pacific Languages Program and how that translation can come in. Now, in terms of what I'm doing, I would put it in one sentence. I've spent about 3 months here. The amount of writing and research I've done here in 3 months is much more than I ever did in Fiji over the last 10 years. So I used to tell myself that I couldn't write in another country, that it was important for me as a writer to remain in Fiji, to do my best work from there and all of that, And coming to Iowa has taught me that I was wrong. You can write from anywhere. And sometimes it's important to have a little distance when you're working on a big project or piece of work. Yeah. So that's what I've been doing here.
So man, Vinaka vakalevu for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Mary na nomo sema na nomo na vikao stuff, in terms of just mingling with all those writers from all over the world, 34 of them, and I just wishing that our Palestinian writer, would have been part of your program, but you never know. He might be able to join the next cohort.
Yeah, and we have that opportunity when you're nominated and you get through. You can delay your travel by a year or 2 even. Yeah, and some writers do that.
Listen, and thank you for highlighting the topic of language. In terms of you as a writer, you've mentioned about translation, and also the use of the different languages. Because Fiji, we have Hindustani, we have Rotuman, and we have the Itoke language. And I know many of our teachers and potential writers are listening in right now. What would you like to say to them in terms of empowering them to write in their language? As you just mentioned, some of your writers, they have translators because they speak in their own language, Spanish or Arabic,
and they write in their own language too.
and they write in their own language too. What would you like to say to that for our Rotuman, our Hindustani writers and our Itoke writers?
A couple of things, but I'll begin with this. Even before coming to writing, and I think this is more for parents and guardians of children and infants. I think for many people back home, it is usual that when you have a young child, you want the child to speak your language, but sometimes the emphasis is on quickly teaching the child English words or how to speak in English, or exposing the child to television, and they pick up from the English language and accents that they come across in the media. And my encouragement to parents and guardians of children is delay that as much as possible, because once the young child enters a classroom, all of that is going to be wiped out. You do not have to press a fast forward button to make your child speak English and talk English and do music and all of that in a foreign language. As much as possible, you lengthen that period at home where everything is happening in your own language, the mother tongue. That is incredibly important. Now, the reason I say this is because knowing the mother tongue or knowing your own language is what will build the confidence of a kid, of any child out there. And what a child needs before they enter a classroom is a sense of identity as to who they are. And language is the biggest part of it. I have a language, this is what I speak. By the time they go to a classroom, and it is the teacher's job to introduce them to the English language, not yours as parents. Your job is to maintain that mother tongue. Now, one of the reasons I think how it as children mature, and even us as adults, I'm very proud of the fact that I could not speak a word of English when I first went to Lebuka as a kid. I could only speak Vosabakaviti, and it was in the Koro dialect. And of course, we end sentences a particular way. So it was, a lot of kids were being entertained in school the year I began because I was speaking the Wasavakaviti, but in the Koro dialect. Now, so I went and learned Hindi and English in Levuka. Hindi with my family, the extended family, and then what's this? Now, back home in Koro, my parents would talk to my brother and I in Hindi, but we would respond in Wasavagaviti to begin with. That's how it happened. But my point being, as much as possible, keep your child speaking the language. Now, that's I think that's the foremost thing. If they want to sing, write, or anything, that is where they should begin from, because it's the confidence. It's not the ability. It's not the expertise in English that will drive your kid to success. It's the sense of confidence the child has in his or her identity and how they navigate their way in the world. So, and I think teachers would know this more than I would. But for example, it is known if you have a child who is lagging behind in mathematics and science, you have to put you do not put the child in a remedial class for mathematics, for example, when they're in class 1, 2, and 3, or year 1, 2, and 3. If a child is lagging in mathematics, they don't need a mathematics remedial in class 1. You need to put the child in music class or a dance class. That's how they improve their science pickup. So it's the arts, it's in the creative arts where all these skills are being picked up. It's not in the subject matter that we normally push. And I normally say no child in year 1, 2, or 3 should be taking homework home. In fact, maybe not for the first 6 years, because the child's job is to enjoy childhood and gain a sense of confidence. We can no longer impart skills and knowledge that is going to carry a child through life. That is how fast the world is evolving. All of that they will pick up. The world will do that for you. But the best we can do is just put in these, inner skills and strength in our kids. Yes.
Totoo bako ti Vinaka bali Mary na viva ko ngiti lele besar sempre chico me contou boli Vinaka ela tau ela wanga di babalani kalau bina tau temelesi bako tia boli Vinaka ke lesi kita kaun robe vikim ni kita sempre chico mai Fijian sky Vinaka bali na nom di barro tico mai ke na nonda bulani sempre sar chico mai na city of Iowa and lomo di bonole bungo o America. Mary Rokonadravu and the Vinaka ni sile to kona nona ngauna sambung leu sartingo me bua and asin ni nona burubura ya nanu mo ko me indan bena kami ko me biwa sei we can to tokan din na undang sa maruta kana nona Talanoa and kabiongo Mary o sema the weekend just share with us, when did your writing journey begin? I'm just always curious about this, even though we had fun time at second hall at USP, but I'm sure the writing journey was there before we met. Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. So for me, the oral storytelling came before the written word. I remember always, I would always spend time with older people, basically because there were very few children where I grew up, and it was a copper estate. So it was just me as a child. And if you're a kid and you're surrounded by adults all the time, I think you pick up the language, you pick up the thought patterns. And every grown-up around you feels that it's their responsibility to tell you a story, and tukuni, and I grew up with that in Koro. So with that came family stories. So I would hear a lot of family stories from my grandmother, for example, and then from my dad. And then I think I normally joke about this. By the time I came to Levuka to begin school, I was so highly opinionated that no one could tell me my stories didn't matter. And this is what I mean by the sense of confidence, it's important for a child to have it. Yeah. Because I think if I just went with the education system we had, or the Western education system, I would have lost all that. But yeah. And then the next thing was in the writing journey was the community library. which is in the National Trust building, the old MH building in Levuka. The library opened in, I think, 1981 or 81. And I remember because Sarate Erosito was my class teacher and took us to the library for the first time. So it began from there. And then, you get to write essays and stories in English class, if you remember. So for me, that was always the best class to have, where you're studying literature, you're doing poetry and short stories and novel, and where you're doing creative writing, or writing essays. And then the key to that, of course, is this: you cannot write, like what Clara shared. If you want to be a writer, you have to be one of the greatest readers you yourself. You have to read. And we just linking it to rugby, that's one of the things I wanted to share. In rugby, for example, a child who wants to excel in rugby and all of that, number one, will grow up playing the game in the village or in the neighborhood. The child will be exposed to rugby, and if his or her parents see the interest and all of that, they can build that. I think a lot of parents do that. So I usually say, if you have a child who is not doing well in school, is having trouble reading or writing, you equate it to rugby. If you have to get the child interested in reading, for example, because reading is the key that unlocks everything else. It's nothing further than that, which is the same as taking an interest in a sport. Every time a rugby game comes on, you watch it on television. You do it all over the weekend. You do it whenever Fiji plays. And it's the same for a young child and for parents who want their children to do better, I think. The important thing is to don't buy them a mobile phone. Buy them a library membership card. I was going to say, here in Iowa, it's all free. You just go and put your name in and you get your card. I'll tell you, so in Suva, for example, if I go and want to become a member of the library, it might take a while. In Iowa, it took me less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. They just look at your ID, take a photograph of you, and give you a card, and you get to choose from many pictures what card you want. But it's that simple. And another thing here in Iowa, in the library, for example, they even have a program for pregnant mothers, pregnant women. If you're expecting a child, you go for reading. So the child and you are introduced to reading and stories well before you deliver the baby. So, and that's where it all starts from,
Isa totoo kasaranga. Wow. Right there. Hey, limu na kanda bulida. Maybe the Sub City Library, any other libraries that are listening in, most of the staff, please make it 4 minutes. The registration form. Eu kuni balabo tu na form. Kay lain balabo. Sana kay huyo tu na iri-iri. Gaya da nili. Usada ker-ker tala. Usala ko iban.
Yeah, and then how in Fiji we have this practice where we make unreasonable demands of citizens, I think, You go for a small thing and you want 3 IDs or something, or 4 IDs. Oh no, your passport is not enough. You want your passport and your TIN number and I don't know how many other documents.
It's birth certificate, marriage certificate,
but it's totally the opposite here. And everything just opens up for you within minutes. As far as, like, for example, libraries and all of that. Yeah.
The less stress they put on the people, the more they'll be interested to come back. The return visitation.
Yes.
When you treat it nicely on day one, you'll keep coming back. Kaya wala ko doon na store and they treat me well, matakatalo sa ambang basika.
We even do it here. Yes.
Okay there. Isa, pinakabakaliw. Come to na librarians. Marunong kumay ker-ker. Muso sombo na miniti.
And Tarisi, if you want to do advocacy in the future, there are 2 groups of people I think should have very high salaries. One is primary school teachers and ECE, the kindergarten teachers, and the other one are librarians. They need very high salaries for the impact they bring to a population through their work with children. They should even get paid higher than most other career pathways out there. you know.
Wow. Yes, we are up to increase your salaries, Wickham Donna librarians and the early childhood educators. Man, we love you. The amount of
Yes.
work you all do for all of us, me and Mary, we went through that EC program too, and also our children and our grandchildren and care seranga. Definitely, there'll be something we will, vouch for and support our librarians. They do such an amazing job, and also early childhood educators is so dedicated, to their work, and it's just so beautiful to see the work that they do every day. Even some of them I know, they transferred this. There was an EC teacher right in the middle of Netasiri. She's from Rotuma, and Mary, she started their own library from scratch.
But that's what and that's what I mean. When we should have a system which rewards well, initiatives that are like that, from individuals who are like that. Unfortunately, most of it is sometimes forgotten. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that, and that's really appreciated. So to our librarians and our EC teachers, we do remember you, we think of you, and definitely there will be, processes to be followed that if we can, push
Or
for more
run
recognition.
advocacy at least, like in a budget and stuff like that. The national budgetary process. Yeah.
Now, in terms of your education and interest, would you like to share that with us, Mary?
Sorry, what was the question again, Tarisi?
Your education and other interests that you have, because I know, you spent most of your time, reading and writing. Are there other interests you have that you'd like to share with us?
No, I think in terms of education, most people link education to formal education, what takes place in a school or in a classroom. Whereas the biggest classroom is the world out there, which speaks to how I would say a lot of children and teenagers in Fiji are getting into problems. They're falling through the gaps. It's because of the non-classroom activities and influences. So I would put it this way, that when it comes to education, my interest in particular, when I was growing up, I took science in school. And then, of course, back when it was foundation, I refused to do the maths courses in foundation and then switched to the arts, to the social sciences. That was one. And that's not a decision I regret. But in terms of education, I think before, when you think about education, you just think about what's happening in the classroom and all of that. Now, being a writer, I think now I pay particularly more attention to text and what students are actually covering in texts, or the curriculum in a classroom. And I do know that if you follow social media and you go through what people are sharing, parents in particular and teachers, which is why I think you're having a curriculum review back in Fiji. But then my question always is, who gets to determine the curriculum review and, the people in it? Because we have a lot of local people. I think it's a role that should be given to local people to do, because we know best what's good for us. And usually local people are passed over for foreign consultants. And I think this is why a lot of problems exist. So hopefully that when that review happens, it's the local experts that our education ministry, depends on more than foreign experts or consultants. Yeah,
absolutely. Because these consultants, they come from outside of Fiji. Yeah, they would have limited knowledge or understanding. It would be really good to have our locals to fill in those roles.
Yeah.
Yes, I've got a question here coming through from Ruthie. She was asking about your book, The Famished Ill. Is it sold in Fiji, or how do people access it?
Okay. That's from Rudy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rudy Takata.
So a very easy answer for Rudy. Famished Eels was part of a novel I had worked on years ago, because I had worked on the longer format first. So no, Famished Eels as a novel does not exist. It's only a short story. However, while I'm here in Iowa, as I shared with you, Tarisi, the amount of writing I've done here is I haven't even done in over the last 10 years collectively. Yeah? So a lot of work that I had started and now I'm finalizing and finishing off here. So as a result of the Iowa residency, a couple of things I'm finishing off. One is a collection of short stories. The second one is a collection of essays or nonfiction writing. The third one is a little bit of poetry that is being translated into a couple of languages. And then the fourth one is a novel. But the novel is what I came and started here. You have things lying around for a while. And then, so this is why I think Iowa for me has had a huge impact in terms of my productivity. So to answer Ruthie's question, you can find me in anthologies. I will give you the link, Tarisi, and you can share it later on your page. So it exists. All my writing exists in collections in other countries, and but in terms of books, we have a few more weeks left here, and we are going to spend a week in New York next week. We're going for a trip there, and we for a couple of activities and events. But while there, and of course, New York is basically a literary capital, so that's where we go to explore other options that we have. So in terms of publication, the only thing I can say for people like Ruthie, Ruthie and other people who are interested, definitely by 2024, you will at least have one publication out.
So
I mean a solo publication, yeah.
Right, Vinaka. Wow. So watch this space, Ruthie. So we'll share. Mary will share the links to some other locations where the collections of her stories are located, and then we'll let you know. I'll share it on my page, Vinaka Vakalevu. Now, let us go into, this leads it very well into the topic of publishing. So how does that work for you in terms of, your writing? Well, you'd have to do your research first, or well, thinking of your topic, then do your research and writing. How do you bring in the topic of publishing in that whole process of identifying the topic, doing your research, writing, and publishing your work?
I wanted to go to the first thing that you mentioned. You mentioned research and writing.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, I think I was always researching from both life and libraries and archives, even when I was in school. So that was a personal interest because I was very interested in history. And then, of course, in science, everything to do with particularly botany, and other things. So I was always the kid you would find in the library or, reading or something like that. So I think that was the important part of research that later served me as a writer, because you have the information base to create things. But as any writer will tell you, the most important part of research as a writer is the life you live, day to day. That is where you draw your most important, that's the most important resource. And this ties in with what Kelera talked about earlier in the earlier interview with you. I think that if you want to become a writer, and this is not something I knew before, it's something I found out, as you develop in your writing. I think that if you want to be a good writer or a serious writer, then you need to have the skill to slow down. And by slowing down, what I mean is you have to learn to periodically disengage from the world, which means that you need to be able to spend time comfortable in your own space with your own self and your own thoughts. You should not be afraid of not talking to people for a while, say if it's an hour or 2 hours, but little things like that come into the creative practice. The other thing is, think the most important quality for anybody who works as a writer or any artistic space, whether you're a movie maker, a photographer, a painter, or poet or anything, or even a musician or singer, because creativity comes to you in your solitude moments and also in larger groups. So you have to be able to go between both worlds comfortably. That's the most important thing. And I think the biggest one is you have to constantly remain a child. So you're able to look at the world the way a child would. You always have, where things would not interest an adult, you as an adult would have the same interest the way a little child would. So, and I think that's where the best stories come from. Yeah, that's how I would put it.
Sa totoo ko, Vinaka. And I know a lot of our teachers don't Vinaka, and we have some really excited audience connecting it right now. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for all your questions as well. Bula Vinaka, Dr. Mary Sovic, this is our new Vanuatu sister, connecting in. She's based in Washington and runs her own the Melanesian Women of Today project with Vinaka vakalevu, Dr. Mary, for the work that you do as well. So in terms of competition, so there will be these people here, I'm going to shoulder tap to apply to those competitions. I'm sure some of them have written some work. Now tell us about, writing competitions. For you to become a writer, for you to become what you are now, are writing competitions important for them?
Okay. Tarisi, I will link this, sorry, because I realize now I probably didn't answer your question well, because you talked about publishing. I will link it to this answer that I will give for, what do you call it, for writing competitions. Yeah? So there are several pathways I know to publishing. And Kelera and the other writers who came on board would each have shared with you the way they got published, so now, before I go into that, there are two things that I would like to mention that I think would be of interest to Fiji writers, or people who are interested in publishing or writing. My advice is, before you look at Fiji, if you're looking for inspiration, please look at what people in Papua New Guinea and in Vanuatu are doing. Because these, for me, remain the key sources of inspiration for me in my writing journey. It's how the Papua New Guineans have organized themselves as a literary giant, basically, in terms of productivity, and in terms of publishing. And then, of course, their writing competitions, including the Crocodile Prize, which is linked to them. And it goes up and down, but they're always active in literature and in creative production. The other one is this recent project that has come out of Vanuatu, and they were featured during the Melanesian Festival of Arts. I know a few that I'm following on social media who are active in that, plus a writer and mentor that they have from Australasia, So it's a very good setup. Now, when it comes to publishing in Fiji, I would say we do not have that advantage. Now, previously, I used to think that the University of the South Pacific should be doing more, because they were doing a lot in the 70s, straight after the late 60s when the university was established. But then I realized that when universities corporatize, the amount of funding and support that would be given to the literature department, the arts, like in Oceania Center, and for creative writing in particular, is next to nothing. Because in the corporatization model, the university is supposed to make a profit. It's all about money making. Now, the initial function of a university was not to make money. It was to develop the human minds, so that these minds would go out and learn and contribute the most to nation building. But when you monetize it, and everything depends on numbers, it would be the causes that bring in the highest student numbers that would be favored in terms of resourcing. That's at least how I'm reading it. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what is apparent at this stage. Now, when that happens, there is never going to be any publishing from, let's say, a literature department. What previously writers could do, So at the rate it's going, I don't know how they're doing in FNU and University of Fiji, but I suspect maybe they are doing better. I'm not sure. This is stuff that you Tarisi, could find out, and maybe FNU and University of Fiji, could share that, because I would be interested in seeing what they do. Now, because the opportunities for publishing in Fiji were little, and when I say little, this is what I mean. When you publish a book, it's about the publishing, and then it's about distributing it and marketing it and promoting it and selling it, which is the journey Kelera talked about earlier with you. Now, when Kelera chose to publish, she had one goal, and she's writing for people back in Fiji, and she wants Itoke Fijians or indigenous Fijians to know that it's possible to write. It's possible to make sacrifices and pay for your own publishing. So that's her journey. Now, for me, it's become a little different. From the beginning, I knew that I was in doing work, like normal day-to-day work, that takes a lot of energy out of me. I find it very taxing, because I work in communications and knowledge management, Already in that field, I'm doing a lot of writing. So do I have would I be doing everything myself and then deciding to put it out? And I did the comparison, and for me, that was not going to be possible. If I was going to do it, it wouldn't turn out very good. So the way I decided to get published was, okay, if I cannot get published, what is the next best thing? The next best thing is to enter competitions. Because if you enter competitions and you have, you don't really have to win, even if you get shortlisted or longlisted. These are things that literary agents and publishers value. I've come to realize. But the second thing is, winning a competition is not enough. You have to keep producing material. So writing, I would say, while it is a creative practice, it's also an industry, it's a job that you have to commit to if you want to take it seriously. So you have two kinds of writers: those who want to make money. I don't think anyone is really in that one. Most people in our part of the world, we're doing it for the love of literature, the love of writing, and the love of sharing stories. But at some point, it will probably go in that direction. So my advice is, enter competitions as much as you can. The easiest one is the Commonwealth one. So I'm going to say this. The current one for 2024, the due date or the deadline for the short story competition is 1st of November. Now, at the same time, the Commonwealth is also running, it's not a competition, but they are asking for submissions on poetry. And they've also said that they can take poetry in other languages. The only thing they're asking you to do is you can write the poem, or you can do it as spoken word, which means you recite it and you record yourself doing it, or someone records it, and you send it to the Commonwealth writers, Commonwealth Foundation. So that is available online. And I would put it this way: if you make it into that collection or something, it can open up further and bigger opportunities for you. So in terms of publishing, for me,
Yes.
I'm looking to get published, but through getting a literary agent. That's how I would put it. Yeah. So it's a longer journey. It's a little tougher, but that's a choice you make as a writer, which way you want to go, And I would say, if this was me, say 20 years ago, and this is my advice, if you are writing, do not follow what I did, where you are writing and you're keeping your stories to yourself.
Yes.
The important thing is you need to find people who support you and who you can trust to give you an honest analysis of your work. You share it with them, you get feedback on how you can improve or what's working and what's not. And then the second thing is you using that you enter competitions, and don't wait for too long. I waited more than 20 years before I ever submitted to a competition.
So would that include that's kind of like your tip that you want to share with those who want to submit to competition? Don't hold
Yes.
on to your work, share it.
Share it and put it out there. And the
Put it
other
out
thing, of course, is one of the best things that you can have as a creative practitioner, as a writer, is find people to support you, or who already support you and take an interest in your work, because these people become invaluable to you throughout your life. For me, I'm very, very lucky in that my husband does that for me. But ideally, it should not be your husband or wife.
Yes.
Yes, because sometimes they will only tell you the good things, and and if you're giving it to somebody who's saying, "Oh, it's great all the time," then, oh, maybe you're not paying attention to it. But find a close friend, and all of
Someone
us
that can
people,
critique,
yeah, yeah. And usually the best people are the ones around you that you know.
Totoo ka saranga. Oh, Reva, or Rudy sabi tuming on the dates. To those of you interested, Commonwealth Poetry Competition is due on the 22nd of October.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sa wala ka lang saranga go sa mother nga minggo.
No, but the competition had been put out a while ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah, this is the closing. Yeah.
the closing. Okay. Wow, Vinaka vakalevu. Totoo ka saranga. We've got some comments from here. Vinaka vakalevu. Check it, Ray. Yeah, find people that you can share. Yeah, there's some comments coming through, and many of them, commenting on our conversations. Sa totoo ka din na, Mary, for those of you who have been sitting on the fence, and most of the time we often doubt ourselves.
Yes.
Sa wala ito na ka, and then you're thinking, no, this is not good enough. And wakana katulad ko kalera, tukun talaga Dr. Gina, you saranga, you'll be the best critic, and also the one who will be the voice of your work. If you really believe in it, and then you shoulder tap others around you, the ones that you can trust. Mary.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say was, Tarisi, for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize, remember that they don't accept writing only in English.
Wow.
So remember that last year you had one who was shortlisted in our region, Bakabina from Papua New Guinea. He wrote his short story in Tok Pisin.
Wow.
And but the thing is, he himself translated it into English. But my point being, you can use a local language as long as the translation is possible into English for the judging process. But they accept pieces from translations. Yeah.
Right. For those of you who are interested to submit your work to these competitions, you can also write it in your language. And I'm sure for some of these competitions, yes, and I'm ready to make the criteria. So make sure take some time to read what the criteria are, and then you just follow.
Yeah. And then Tarisi, just to add to something that you and Kelera had discussed previously, the journey for publishing, and I'm saying this in particular to Itoke language users for Vosavakabit. And you Tarisi mentioned them, the Itoke Trust Fund Board. Okay.
Yes.
The TTFB, if you look at what they're doing now, they're into very innovative programming, like their entrepreneurship initiatives in rural areas, in villages, and by clan or something like that. Now, sometimes an institution may not know how to do something, but you as a people can design it and take and propose it to the TTFB. So one of the things I'll share is this. Previously, TTFB was supporting indigenous writers. And I remember because Dr. Apollonia Tamata was there, and she was working with Fijian writers. So you had mixed success, and usually that's the case anywhere. So but a lot of the texts that were being produced for the school curriculum for reading. The other effort that came through was from the Asia Foundation. They put out a lot of big reading books, and I think the retired teachers at the Fijian Teachers Association, some of them took part in that activity as well. Now, one of the key things that I can share is this. If we are a culture that does not have writing as a practice, that not many people are writing, sometimes the encouragement should not be that you need to do a whole book. You can do small pieces. Now, so for me, one of the best things that the Itoke Trust Fund Board could do is let them have a journal or a magazine that comes out every year or twice a year. And it can have creative writing from Fijians everywhere. So then you would have a bilingual magazine. So for example, it could be both in Vossavakaviti and translated into English, for example. It could have Rotuman and then translated into English. So these are possibilities, because sometimes if you live in a country like Fiji, and I know that I was very discouraged when I began my journey, sometimes if the big one is not available, all we are really looking for is, okay, I don't have to be published alone. I can be published as part of a collection. But knowing full well that as you begin to be published in the collection, the real pathway you're looking for is to doing your own book someday. But this is a good start for people who are just beginning to write. And it's a big confidence booster, So those are the things I think the TTFB could be looking at, But it would need voices such as yours, to pitch it to them.
Pitch it to them. Dia na todo ko Vinaka vakalevu Mary. But the level kango it really some of the criteria because they support even now they supporting Rotuman language as well. So our Rotuman writers, I'll be talking to Fesaitu Solomoni later this evening. So that'll be great. So I'm glad that we have a Rotuman in our mix of our group of authors that we highlighted this week. Tara kanong gumaraw Mary, lew talaga na feedback, positive feedback from the community. At least this is a platform that can, inform them, shed some light on some things that they're not clear about.
And the last thing to cover publishing, sorry, Teresi.
Don't worry.
Okay. If you're interested in publishing, the one other thing I can share with you is this. Always buy books by local writers, if books are being put out, or by Pacific Island writers. Because we can talk about publishing, but publishing means that people need to be buying the books, So this is an encouragement to, for example, Fijians who are in the diaspora, Fijians say who are in other countries. Maybe there are programs that can be set up where if a family is not able to afford a book or book purchases in Fiji, when it comes to creative books or reading, then it can be sponsored by someone else. At one time when, where I was really thinking outside of the box, I even thought, wow, wouldn't it be nice if FNPF, for example, in your membership, your funding portfolio, you had a little bit of money put aside, not for the purchase of textbooks and school equipment, but for the purchase of books that come out, that children can read, and books by Fijian writers or Pacific writers, because this is how you get to grow a generation of children that will begin to read literature. See, if you don't have a reading population, no amount of publishing will make sense, because the publishing has to transfer to the reading. It's a cycle. If we have a situation where people in other countries are more interested in our writing than our own population, then we have an issue. And I think the media could do a lot. Newspapers, TV, and radio.
More advocacy, using the media and mainstream media too.
I mean, if you imagine on television, radio, or in the newspaper, if you had just a little section where they read a poem by a local writer or a Pacific writer, but little things like that, yeah.
Sa totoo kasaranga. Man, Vinaka vakalevu. And I'm glad, you mentioned, we need a reading population, and also like it's also generational. Because I remembered, when we were at USP, there were so many, writers older than us, and then we kind of like have a gap. And I think that was a point that Clara was saying last night, that it came to a point where, she was looking around for, even Itoke writers, she couldn't see any.
Yeah.
And many others have passed away. And,
Yeah.
I noticed she was so emotional about it last night. And Vinaka Toke Lera for, sharing your story and your emotion as well, for encouraging, a lot of our writers. Misa rota na alam balabu. Weekend na tayo biti kung konta warong ti kumay. Da bola bola ni ruth tukan. Au ker lem sa tukan mo talanoa lem na no mo tuk chugur bi kuno kuleo. Let us write. The bola bola. Iya, Mary, pamadal tak man weekend na the function of literature in a country, like just use Fiji as an example. Domadalong pamadal na tikene.
Okay. I think to talk about the function of literature, it's important to talk about how stories come, or how stories are created. So I would put it this way: for most of us, and I know this applies to me, you don't plan a story. Like I said, if you want to write, you just need to be a person who knows to be more curious about the world and needs to pay more attention to the world. And the stories will automatically come out. So, so when it comes to the function of literature, we need, I think you cannot call writing literature until it begins to expand or to grow. So in Fiji, for example, and I was really happy to hear from Kelera that Satendra Nandan and Subramani, Professor Subramani, were very inspirational to her and encouraged her to write. They, of course, were not at USP when we were there, Tarisi. So they had left. Yeah. But now, why is that important? If you look at literature in Fiji, mostly, and when I say literature, I'm talking about creative writing. I'm not really talking about, say, other forms of writing like non-fiction work. I'm just looking at poetry, short stories, novels, and drama, for example, or plays. If you look at most of the literature, it was coming from early Europeans and their descendants now. That's one group. You have one segment of that. Then when you had there was a burst of literature that came with the establishment of USP, because most of the people, young people who were coming to USP to study when it was first established, were coming from countries that had been fighting for independence or were just beginning to get decolonized. So the literature was more talking about, the colonial power getting out. Put the white men out, and it's that sort of a coverage that was going on. And then, of course, you had another burst of literature when the whole development issue and the extractive industries, and you'll see it now, like with climate change, with the Fukushima incident. You will see poetry coming out and stories, from young people. So little things like that. Now, because writing tends to come from disruptive events like that, it's important to hear it from many voices, not from just one voice. So, for example, at the time that Satendra Nandan, Professor Subramani, Raymond Pillay were writing, you had very few Itoke writers who were writing, and it continues to be the case. One of the things that I can share, and I know this from my upbringing, my mom was illiterate. She couldn't read and write, but that was an issue because she was on an island where her dad couldn't put her to school. My dad could read and write, but he could only do Hindi, and he'd had only about 3 years of formal education. So from that background, I turned out to be a writer, and that was because of the strength of libraries and great teachers in school who kept that flame alive. And my parents did too, even though they were not fully educated formally. Now, what is the function of literature is this. If you look at the political problems we have in Fiji, and most of the misunderstanding or the intolerance we have between races and between religions. So here I'm talking about Indians, Fijians of Indian descent. We're talking about Europeans and their descendants, and we're talking about Itoke Fijians. If you look at the whole political process and everything that takes place, one of the reasons is because we do not have an arts or literature sector that allows us to have that conversation at national level. So this is the important thing. Satendra Nandan writes the short story, for example, A Pair of Black Shoes. You know, we all study it. Raymond Pillay writes The Celebration, which came out in the collection Roots, you know. There's one Fijian writer there who I would have loved to see develop into a great novelist or short story writer, and that is, there was a writer there called Akanisi Sombu, you know, and she had incredible text there. The other one is Vanessa Griffin. Now, when you do literature well and you teach it in the schools and people around the country read it, it builds a racial understanding, it builds cultural understanding. So that, and I'll give you an example, you know, so in the 2000 coup, for example, 2000 civilian takeover, for example, when we had that incident, that political takeover, we had all these rumors. I remember, because I'm from Levuka, so it really troubled me when I was listening to all these things. And we know that these are not making sense. They are false stories, but people fall into the trap of rumors and rumor mongering, and then you begin the racial hatred. So it's this. There's a tunnel from this particular Masonic temple in Levuka. It goes all the way to CWM hospital, and people are drinking blood and all of this. You know, see, this is what happens when we are not a society that is grounded in religious understanding to know what religions are, in cultural understanding to know what different cultures are, and in historical understanding to know what our different experiences are. So anytime someone comes up with a small rumor and lights a fire, the fire burns us as a country. And this is how we fall apart. See, this is, for me, this is one of the key functions of literature. And my problem over the years has been this, and I say it all the time. I run a workshop, you know. We are listening to, we have Fijians of Indian descent, you know, like Indian writers, and they're male. So already I have a problem there, because not with them, by the way, it's good that they're writing, but I would like to hear from female writers, you know, or of Indian heritage in Fiji. So women who are writing, their stories are important, but we don't see it much. Then, of course, the bigger gap for me is it has always been the fact that we don't get to hear from Itoke Fijian writers. And for me, as long as the Itoke, you know, community is not writing, is not telling stories, is not expressing its opinion to political events, is not expressing its opinion to economic trends, you know, through creative arts, we have a problem, because it means that the Itoke community is not talking. Everything that is happening there is, you know, in loose conversation, and we don't know what the structure of that conversation is. Because when you have a society that begins to talk and document its stories, the current generation and the ones coming from behind have an opportunity to study that, you know, to see, oh, wow, so 20 years ago, this is what they were talking about. 50 years ago, it was this. Now, none of this applies. We are talking about this. But this is how you measure trends, and that is how peace is built in a country. So, and for me, this is why literature is important. But you will see in classrooms, literature is one of the subjects that kids hate in Fiji. And I know this because I grew up and went to school with kids who hated literature class and writing and all of that. And it goes back to a very simple thing, if I can quickly share it. It's this. If a child is misbehaving, you know, if a child is being naughty in the home, it will be, sometimes it would be, the punishment would be you have to go and sit quietly in a corner somewhere or something like that, if you're not getting the corporal punishment, which is usually the normal. And one of the sad ones for me is this. And this is why I think most children in Fiji do not associate reading with a safe, secure, and positive experience. When a book is given to a child to read, the first instruction is hold it properly, wash your hands, don't dirty the book, don't tear the page, those little things. So the parent's concern or the teacher's concern is the state of the book. And I want to share something interesting. Every time you listen to a children's literature class, one of the first things that lecturers will tell you, and publishers who work in the children's book industry, when you give a book to a baby or a child, if they want to eat it or bite it or spit on it, sit on it, take some mud and rub it on it, it's important in the first year or so that you allow that to happen, because the child has to associate, a good feeling with the act of touching a book. But you cannot be, screaming at a child not to dirty a book or something and then expect the child to read or love reading later on. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So that was one of the key takeaways for me in terms of, following children's literature and how reading is encouraged.
And it's wonderful in terms of your the work that you do, because you do short stories, there's poetry, there's other fiction work that you write, even essays. So so for those who may be wondering in terms of your creative practice, how would you describe it? What does it look like, Mary?
Okay. There are many things I could say about creative practice, but I'll just cover one.
Done.
One is sometimes people have this romantic idea of what a writer's life is like, I think. So, you get inspired and suddenly in the middle of the night you're going to write a poem and all of that. And usually that's not how it happens. So you will get a lot of bursts of inspiration, is how I would put it, which is why the journaling is important. So if you're wanting to write, like I said, be curious about the world and live your life a little more openly. That's one. When I first started writing, I told myself Suva would never be an interesting city for me to write about. And now most of my writing talks about Suva. And it's not the fancy buildings and all of that. It's the back streets, the alleyways, the industrial spaces. Because, the shipping yards and the wharves and the boats and all of that. Because that for me, in the marketplaces, the Suva market, that for me is where the life of Suva is. It's not in fancy buildings and offices and all of that, although that is important. So what I mean is, if you're wanting to write, then that should be of more interest to you. I'll give you another example in creative practice. In terms of observation. And I think this is where Itoke communities have a lot of advantages than other races. You have to go to an Itoke family event, whether it's a funeral, a wedding, or a birth or something like that. Just listen to the conversations that take place around these spaces. And if you're a writer and then you're attending to events in these spaces, that should be the source of many, many pieces of writing. Because the conversation is not only about what's fun and what's happening or what is said. The conversation is also where you are mapping out what the taboos are and the relationships are. So for me, one of the biggest ways of solidifying or making cohesive these traditional relationships and taboos and what is permissible and all of that. The literary form can be a very powerful way of doing that. Yes. But instead, I think the normal practice is, you tell kids in that situation, or maybe when you have conversations with children. Yeah. But literature is a more powerful way of doing it, I think.
Sa Vinaka, Mary. And I know for those of you who are listening in, we have a treat before we finish our Talanoa. Mary's going to read not one, but two pieces of her writing to us. So please stay tuned, and we will all enjoy the work. And she's going to explain to us the background of the particular pieces that she's gonna read to us. So Mary, we've been talking about the potential that well, we talked about Iowa, and looking at sort of the Pacific, thinking of what can the Pacific do, the different cities or the different islands in terms of branding, and looking at how they can be able to identify something that is unique and focus on just one thing, rather than trying to do too many things. Now, coming back to Fiji, we talked about, encouraging the writing spaces and opportunities and publishing, encouraging maybe focus groups and getting more people working together in whatever genres that they choose, and also the publishing side of it, which we talked about with Kelera. What's your vision of that, Mary, to benefit Fiji?
You mean at national level?
National level, yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll preface myself here before I respond to that. Okay. People don't like talking about race. People don't like talking about race. It's almost like if you talk about race, that's politically incorrect. Now, my argument against that would be in a multicultural and diverse society, where our diversity could be of benefit to us, we need to be able to speak about race and ethnicity, because that's how resourcing happens. That's how resourcing happens. And if we are living in a diverse community, which is why I'm glad that the Bureau of Statistics has now gone back to disaggregating data by ethnicity as well, when it comes to education, to health, to poverty, and all of that. It's important because it's not that we should know the data and then blame other races. It's not that. What it enables us to do is we look at the ethnic data based on health, on education, and every other thing, because it will tell us where we should be making the necessary investment. Now, having said that, one of the most important things to note as well is there are some problems that are not ethnic based, so they run across multiple communities. So, for example, education outcomes, it could be some differentiation between communities. Why is it important to talk about race when it comes to education outcomes? It's so that as a government or as a community, we can study what is working in another community and learn to apply it in ours. It is that sense of being intentional that is not taking place. But sometimes the creative arts can be used for that space. The other thing I would say is a couple of decades ago, Fijians of Indian descent were the ones whose mortality data. A lot of people were dying because of NCDs, heart conditions and hypertension and all of that. Now it's moved to Itoke communities. So and then if you look at people who are taking part in physical activity, I know no survey has been done, but if you look at the waterfront in Suva, you will largely see other races and not necessarily Itoke people. You might, but the number is not as high as other races engaging in physical activity. So I'll begin with that. Now, your question, how can I answer that? You'll have to help me here.
Yeah, because I think there's pockets of writing, right? That is happening. For example, we've looked at some of the academic institutions. Yeah,
Yes.
we've got USP, we've got University of Fiji, we've got
So,
FNU, and then of course you've got the Itoke Trust Fund for the Itoke writers and Rotuman writers. So what would you kind of maybe envisage for all these kind of institutions, maybe to kind of to work together, or how would that kind of benefit our young up and coming writers, for them to kind of have a space that is safe for them, that they can like, this is for me, I want to be a writer.
I would put it this way. I think in the beginning, it's important to work in smaller pockets, in separate institutions. And then when there is a sense of being able to stand firm, then it's important to have an open platform for all. Now, it could happen either at separate times, or it could happen together simultaneously. That's also important. So I'll begin with the institutions that have that responsibility to look after the creative arts. The first one that exists, because they already use it in curriculum, are universities. So USP, FNU, and the University of Fiji, they're in a position to do that. The second one is the Ministry of Education itself, because they need local content to supplement the foreign literature that they teach. And I don't know what the percentage is, but if you look at what final year students, for example, in secondary school are learning in literature, you can tell that they are lacking content, local content, for example. Now, having said that, I know for a fact that my short stories, most of my short stories, do not qualify to be taught in high school. They can be taught at university, but not in high school, and purely for the content or the themes being covered in some of them. Other short stories, yes, they can use. So it's a matter of that. But then I would put it this way, that it's important that those who are the curriculum, the curriculum developers, and they need to be extremely widely read to know what's out there. Yeah. And maybe Tarisi, through your program, you could be contributing to things like that too, because we have now diaspora writers who are producing things that Fiji should be using, So that's one. The second thing is for a country to have a strong literature, there is something else that is needed, and that is you need critics. Now, you don't need critics for literature only. You need cultural and arts critics who have space, either online or in the newspapers, radio, and TV, where they talk about what is being produced locally. So, for example, you need critics who talk about new short stories, poetry, drama, and books that are coming out. You need critics who are talking about the new music that is being put out by Fijian musicians, and you need critics who can talk, who can go to an art exhibition. So I'll give you one example. So in November, there's an art exhibition opening at the Oceania Center, which is a solo exhibition by Sue Elliott, and she's of Itoke heritage. Now, Sue Elliott is going to put up a solo exhibition. It's a Fijian woman. It's in Itoke, a Fijian woman. I don't know when was the last time that happened. So the media will go to that exhibition, and they will talk about what the exhibition was like, and maybe a few comments from Larry or the VC or the artist herself, and what inspired her and what are the pieces and all of that. However, if you want the visual art sector to grow, you need critics who are growing experts in the field, and who can tell you that Sue Elliott put out this collection, and it's it's related to this, it's covering this theme, it's covering this issue in Australasia, or it's covering this issue in our Fijian community, or things like that. Because when you have critics that can do that, then the local population, or us as a community, we can have a deeper sense, appreciation for what these creative people are doing. So I'll give you an example. So, name me a Fijian musician. Like one example I can give is this, Lesa Bolokoro. You have recent ones like Savuto and Sero Serevi from the other generation. See, they've been putting out music for a long time, but you don't have critics who can take their music and talk about the development of music, for example. Yeah. And we need people like that to bring that on a plate and give it to us as locals so that we can understand. This is what music sounded like in the 40s. This was in the 50s, not 70s. And then my question would be, if you're a connoisseur of music, it would be, oh my goodness, my grandmother was singing that song, you know, and now it's being remixed or redone by this particular artist here. And that is how you have intergenerational, you know, exchange. So there are different ways of doing it. So I would say this, it's important in the for literary arts that you have critics. Yeah. And the media, and the third thing, of course, is the media needs to give space. So one of the ways could be this, if the government were to do policy making, then the policy could be, if you, right now they only have a policy on local content, you know, like this % has to be local programming. This %, you know, that's the only thing they have for, I think, television and radio. But if you were to extend it a little deeper to make it more meaningful, then it should be this percentage of, you must give this percentage of airtime or screen, you know, airtime or print space to promoting the arts and in Fiji, for example. You know, and you can't just take pictures and splash it. It has to be some written content with it. Things like that. But that's how you deepen a policy so that the country has to pick it up. The media industry has to pick it up. Because I don't think any amount of advocacy will do that directly with the media. But if government is lobbied, then the policy can be put in place. Yeah. So a little, I would say little things like that. Yeah.
So, Vinaka vakalevu, Mary, and I think, you know, this Talanoa sessions, these conversations, I think is so timely. You know, now that we have the new government and, you know, also different departments have got their budgets. So hopefully, you know, those who hold those purse strings can be listening to be able to provide that support for our writers, you know, that we really need. For Fiji. Vinaka Mary for shedding light and also envisioning what the future can look like with your points that you raised. Wow.
And,
yeah,
Tarisi,
carry on.
sorry. Just one thing. I mean, I don't know who's tuning in, but for listeners out there, you know, like one, I can give you one example very quickly. Yes. For me, that creative practice or literature could help address it, and it's this. It's the status of women in Fijian communities, the condition of women in Fiji. So we know that Fiji lags behind in a lot of this, in violence against women and children, in sexual offenses toward children, little things like that. But we see it only as data and as stories in the media. Now, imagine if you had Itoke writers who actually talked about it and wrote stories about it. Because this is the difference between a media article and a short story or a novel. In a media article, you are given the information. In a TV news report, you are given the information. Now, when you read a story that covers that, you are put into the shoes of the people who go through it. And this is how change comes to a community, because the original people who could not say something can, as a result of literature, be moved to actually do something about it. And this is how, this is one of the functions of literature anyway. So that's one way of doing that. Because see, today, if we were to sit in a meeting and talk about the condition of women, say a child is abused in a village or something like that, out of what we define as respect and taboo and all of that, we cannot really have a conversation. Yeah. And if a woman or the woman's family were to report it to the police, chances are a lot of people wouldn't be engaging with that family for a while, you know, because it looks bad and it's awkward. But this is where poetry, short stories, And even short films can do that, can bring these themes together. And that is the function of the creative arts. It's to take what is uncomfortable about a community and teach us to look at it and do something about it in a new way. Yeah.
Yeah, the power that we have, as you said, as we all know, the pen is mightier than the sword. So there needs to be a lot of this writing that can impact our society. And of course, you raise some really interesting topics there, some very sensitive ones that has been in the media. Thank you, Mary, for encouraging many of us, and I'm sure even our journalists in our newspaper companies in Fiji. Perhaps they need to listen to our conversation, Mary, or perhaps some workshops for them.
I think
I'm just loving
yeah.
this.
I think I would say I think the media does cover it, yeah, they cover it in terms of research data that comes out of the organizations and from especially from the DPP's office, their statistics, yeah. But then change won't only come from data alone, you need the
Yeah.
storytelling that comes with it, yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. And speaking of storytelling, we have some parents and some young writers also listening in, right now. Um, what would be your advice to them? I know you've shared quite a few, throughout Talanoa. Some gems that you've been sharing is amazing. I give you the opportunity now to address them for our parents as well as our young writers.
You Tarisi, sorry, you mean in terms of writing?
Yes, in terms of writing.
Okay. In terms of writing, if you're a young writer, out there, and maybe you've secretly been writing poetry or some stories, or maybe you just keep a journal or diary where you're putting your thoughts down and things like that. My encouragement is that this is part of the beginning of the journey, so you should keep doing that. If you feel that you're confident in your storytelling and you're beginning to develop stories, and if you're in school, you make sure that you're engaging with a teacher or teachers who support that and who are excited about it as much as you are. Now, why is it I'm saying not necessarily your teacher? It's because sometimes when we are young, we are not comfortable showing it to our, direct teacher. Maybe there's another teacher we're comfortable with. So it's in terms of looking at that. The third thing is the people around you, your family are often, I'm not saying all, it applies to all, but in some cases, family are supportive. You can show your work to your parents or friends, but I would say try to show it people in the same generation as you also, because usually they would be, if they're like you, then they would be better judges of the quality of the storytelling that you're doing. And then the third one, of course, is there are many opportunities out there for publishing and entering competitions online. Find out as much as you can and do that. I know that I'm active on Twitter and on Facebook. Instagram, I have a page that I use to go and look at other writers' work, but I haven't really been active on it. But iOS is teaching me to be different with that. But if on social media, I normally share a lot of opportunities about writing and competitions, and every now and then I share what I'm doing, and if that's useful, you could do that. And this is why I also put most of my posts on public, so that anyone can read it. And I know some people might disagree with what I'm saying or find it problematic, and that's part of the journey as well. So that's my encouragement. Now, if you're a parent, one of the biggest gifts that you can give your child is the gift of pausing, and when I say pausing, what I mean is don't make your child grow up too quickly. Allow your child to have a childhood, which means establishing the boundaries very early in life, what the boundaries are in terms of basic things. And I know this probably won't make sense, but it's as basic as doing chores around the house, being responsible with time, going out and coming back from home. The third thing being, because what is important for a child to understand from a very basic level is that children have rights, and everybody knows about the Convention of the Rights of the Child, the CRC. But ultimately, it's you as a parent in the home who is going to instill the sense of responsibility, because the Convention on the Rights of the Child will talk about what you should not be doing to the child. You provide a safe home, a safe space, this and this. It will give you all of that. But it's equally important that a child understands what his or her responsibility is to the family and to you as parents. And that will come out through the boundaries you put. And like I said, for me, the most important thing is the pause. In the pause means do not rush your child to understand another language, a foreign one especially. Grow them up in your own. The best gift that you can give your child is a sense of confidence that they never lose as they are growing up, because it's easy to lose that sense of confidence in the wider community and even in the education system. And the third one that I'm going to mention is probably the most important one. And I learned that after I left high school, but it's something that should have been taught to me when I was still young. And most parents, because we're so bent on success, that we do not teach our children that failure is okay. And this is the biggest gift that you can give your child. What we need to impart more to young people is that it's okay to not understand something. It's not okay to not do well in a subject or in a school term or in a year if you're going through things. It's okay to fail at things, because the important thing is life doesn't end with failure, So, and all these things can be taught from childhood. Because when we instill these things, it makes the child prepared for life, and far more confident when they get out, Tarisi, and in both the education system and in bigger life as well. So it's this: a child is found with drugs or something in school. It's not the end of the world. There are still things that can be done to rehabilitate and grow a young life. A girl gets pregnant in school, it's not the end of the world. It's, we have every mechanism to deal with it. And for Itoke society in particular, there's a lot of love and compassion that go into it, a lot of sacrifice. So these are things to be proud of. And these are the things that we need to instill. So you can give all the guidance you want. And whatever falls through, we can always pick up the pieces and move. And I suspect that if more children knew that they can fail at things and it's still okay, they're still loved, we'd probably have a better chance at growing our communities. Yes. And now the question you might have is, how is all this related to writing? Like I said, the biggest quality that you should have probably as a writer, or what can help you, is you have a better and a deeper observation of the world. We should not be teaching our children that they have to come first in class from class 1 to from year 1 to year 13. No, that is not how it is. In life, it's normal to go up and down. And we should accept that as a fact of life. That children, just as adults, you go through depression, you go through bullying, you go through a good time where you have a great teacher, or teachers change and you might not like your teacher or the teaching style, and then your performance goes down. We need to accept all of that and to teach it a little more. And all this is important to the writing practice as well. Because when it comes to the writing practice, or basically any profession you enter in life, it's important to know that you can fail and it's still okay to pick up and move on. It's when we do not teach this enough to our young people that I think more people fail in life and don't pick up. They never really do. So I would say these are the basic things that are really important at the first stage. And then the equally important is you as a parent. If you want to teach your child to read, most people would say, okay, you need to buy books, you need to go to the library. I would add a further thing. Children do not really listen to what we're saying. They learn by seeing what we do around the house. If you want your child to read books and be interested in books, then you as a parent should be a reader. And if you're not, you can teach yourself. It's never too late in life. If you're a parent who comes in and dinner is prepared and the television's on all the time, the child has no opportunity to pick up a book and read, because you yourself are teaching them what the values of the household are. And no child is going to, because children really just imitate us, you know. If we read, they read. If you, for example, are a fireman at work, your child, your son or daughter would want to be a fireman as well, you know, put out fires later on in life. But that's how it begins, with imitation. And I think the best example is what we can set in early childhood or infancy. We have the practice of having a lot of books in the house. Basically, don't even give a child the books. Just have books in the house and you read. They will imitate you. And that's the best start that you can give to any child out there. Yeah.
Reva, Vinaka, vakalevu, Mary. For our parents who are listening in, boleh Vinaka fatafehi, boleh Vinaka Mrs. Tavuto, my Kenya, Jambo, boleh Vinaka Vaseva Modelia, Vinaka Valevu Kimni Kevin Sema Chikumai Tau, Rei Vuya Sawa, this is my Tau from Wunda in VCC, Vinaka Valevu Kimni Sema Chikumai, Mary. Wow. Our sharing today, I feel there needs to be part 2, part 3, part 4, and part 5. And on this Talanoa, it's to be continued, as they say in Hollywood. So, man, Mary, Vinaka vakalevu for such a wonderful Talanoa session. But I know you're going to read your 2 pieces. I don't want to forget that. Would you say a little bit about the pieces you're going to read for us? We're in for a treat, ladies and gentlemen. Mary, tell us the 2 pieces you're gonna read.
So there was a longer piece I wanted to read, but I know you're pressed for time, Darisi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to shorten it, but it's probably something that I wanted to share with people who are interested in writing and probably don't know what works for them. So if you are preparing to write for competitions or even for yourself in terms of developing your storytelling, this is probably the best advice that was given to me much later, but it's something that is useful. I didn't start doing it as a kid, but I did it in high school, I know. And then Tarisi, when we were at university, when I would be writing, writing it was these things that I would do. If you're writing, the thing that you should be most fascinated about to begin with, I'm not saying this is for everybody. This is if you're working in fiction. One of the best places to start from is the world that you inhabit. So in my case, it was the town of Levuka. So when I began writing, I was keenly aware that most of my stories were being centered around that place, that town. It was the town of my childhood. I have a lot of work that I've written that is going to be published, which is also set on an island. And it's not Koro, it's a fictional one, but then most of the features of it are related to how I saw Koro as a child, when I was growing up there. And the same is in Levuka. So this short story, I will read only certain excerpts from it to demonstrate to you probably how detail can be put into a short story to make it work. Now, why do I share this today? It's because when you win a competition, the judges' remarks are sent back to you as a writer. So you know what has worked in the story. And in both times that I won, in the judges' feedback that came back, the 2 things that were picked up is the imagery, which is your description of the world and people. And the second one is the sense of place. And so you have judges who are from other parts of the world, but what they came back with was that when they read the story, they are immediately put into the story. It's not a foreign place because they can identify with it, because the story as it's moving is already describing the setting. So people, before we used to use the word setting, but I think when you use the word place, it's something that we can identify. So I would say this: if I were working on a series of short stories based in, say, Nosori, I know a couple of places that I have seen passing Nosori town over the years that I would want to center stories around. One of it is the old Nosori market. One of it is the bottom of the Rewa Bridge, where you have this ground. For me, these are personal landmarks. The third one is there used to be a Chinese outlet that sells buns or good pastries next to the market. I don't know the name of it.
I think it's Wings and Wa.
Yes, and I'm glad Tarisi said that, because where did I get my first memories of Nosori? It's because when we were first in USP, I had come from Levuka. A very good friend of mine from Lambasa, too, Ella and Mary Taito, because we were new to Suva, and we would love going on bus rides. And so these bus rides, for me, today have become like a source of stories that I can paint, in my writing. So that's where that comes from. And in Suva, for example, the streets of interest to me are, Mark Street, because that's where you have this, you have Rope's Big Bear, and you have this. My early memories when, of Saturday mornings in Suva, you go to town, and you have all these drunk men coming out of this, what do you call that place? Up in Mark Street, that way, Wemanu Road, corner. And also from the Garrick Hotel.
Caesar's Palace.
Caesar's Palace, yeah, all those ones.
Yeah, all the memories coming back now.
Yes. So for me, when I'm writing a story and there's a sense of a setting to be, these are some of the examples. Yeah. So that's what I wanted to show here in this reading, Tarisi. So I will read only parts of it. So you will know if there's a break, it means that I have just skipped a paragraph or two, because all I'm trying to show you is how to put a sense of place and, house or something into a story. Okay. Now, before I read this, I just wanted to give a trigger warning. The story covers suicide, and if you have a problem with it or you are not comfortable with the topic, I would encourage you to step out from the call if you need to. And also, if you need support after that, then you could, I would encourage you to get that as well. But I'm just offering that trigger warning before I read. Okay, so this short story is called, it was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Short Story Prize in 2017. So I had written it in 2016. So it's called The Brief Insignificant History of Peter Abraham Stanhope. And it's written from a part European or Kailoma perspective, yes. At 11:42 p.m. on 1st November 2016, Peter Abraham Stanhope sat at his family's old mahogany dining table and slit his wrists. He had folded 3 clean bath towels to place his hands upon so as not to make a mess. He watched the news first, switched on to Fijian television, crackling against the sudden rain, part of the storm approaching from the east. The islands of Wakaya and Makongai were already cloaked in rain well before nightfall. He showered first, of course, ate his dinner of fried pork sausages, 3 sausages to be exact. Some cassava fried to a crisp, just the way he liked it. He folded his laundry, 1 cotton shirt, 1 pair of cotton trousers, 1 well-worn polyester underwear he had bought from Gulabdas and Son 2 years before. The fragrance of citrus, lime and oranges from the soap powder permeated the living room as he meticulously laid out his clean folded clothes. He opened a can of skipjack tuna chunks and fed his old cat. He had gone up to Mac, his old diabetic workmate, now housebound in Vulcan's Lane, with both legs amputated from the knees down, and addicted to Korean soap dramas on Sky television. He had visited Mac during the day, saying that he was going to Suva on the morning ferry. If Mac could see to the cat who ate tuna chunks and appreciated the odd belly rub. Well, yes, Mac had roared into the quiet afternoon. Yeah, I'm gonna send one of the kids to feed him. If you stay longer, I'm gonna go up the steps, and look after the house for you. And make sure you answer your phone when I call you. They had both worked at PEFCO, the Pacific Fishing Company, driving forklift loads of frozen skipjack and albacore between the Korean fishing boats and the cannery. That was in a better time, when the Japanese still ran the cannery, before the government took over. At least that was the general opinion in town. He remembered to sweep out his toenail clippings from earlier in the day, fold it into an old Fiji Times newspaper page, and put it in the rubbish bin. He knew the Wesleyan Chapel deacon, the Vakatawa, would find him on Sunday morning. He wanted the house and himself clean. His daughter Caroline was married to a sniveling American who sold computers and lived in Maine. Peter had the fall postcards and the winter Christmas cards pinned on the kitchen walls. His son Chona was dead. The men who killed him were now on trial. He had watched them in the news for 2 weeks. Then he rang up his nephew Samuela in Suva. He received the diver's knife from Bob's Hook, Line and Sinker a week later. It did not need sharpening. He read his Bible before he put his wrist on the towels and cut. His hands lay limp, as if he were holding a knife and fork, his wrists momentarily resting from a dinner of baked chicken and potatoes. As if someone at the table were telling an interesting story about an elopement maybe, or sharing a sermon from a Sunday past, and the hushed table was all ears. Were it a painting, the title Abraham's Dinner would be apt. His people have been in the town for 150 years. Let us begin with that, the town. Levuka sits on a black rock with the Pacific at her toes, a tiny row of clapboard stores on its main thoroughfare. With no declaration to creativity, the name Beach Street stuck to the macadam road that once was igneous pebbles salted by the sea. A few stores are of old coral and limestone patched with concrete. There is a Catholic cathedral of modest proportion, a Wesleyan or Methodist chapel of even more modest proportion, and a Masonic temple burnt down by Christian folk. Now, a tuna cannery is there also, and a rabbi with Baltimore who comes to cleanse to kosher twice a year. A little powerhouse hums electricity into the cannery, into homes perched like limpets onto steep, craggy volcanic slopes, and then into the streetlights guiding night shift workers back home, or cigarette-puffing boys jogging to the bakeries for rising dough and morning buns and loaves. There is no drone of a first fly. They must be at the fish cannery at the southern end of town, drunk at the mixing of fish meal for pet food and fertilizer. The whole town cowers under this regular stench from the tuna cannery. It slips into the walls, intoxicating the termites, sinks into the oiled mahogany floors of the old homes, and then into the snake beans outside the Steinmetz's kitchen on Church Street, and into the hand-washed PEFCO, FEA, and PWD overalls on clotheslines along the 199 steps of Mission Hill. The only sound is a mud wasp smoothing the walls of its mud house behind the old German-made wood stove. He lives alone. If no one finds him within a few days, he will bloat in the tropical heat. He also wrote letters, one to Mac, telling him to have prayers in the living room. He had cleaned the living room, gotten down to his knees, and polished the wood floor. He wrote another letter to Caroline, his daughter. When you come to your senses and leave that American, home will be waiting for you, and do not believe in any superstition. My spirit will not be here. I am going to your brother. The last three things that he did that night before sitting to watch the news, before moving to the mahogany dining table, was to wash and season the cast iron skillet, put a fresh roll of toilet paper on the holder, and call his son's mobile telephone number. His son was gone, as was the phone, but he called it every night. He had called it for the last 3 years, and he had never been able to sleep without calling. He knew that he called more for himself than for Chona, but in a very deep, hidden place, he wished Chona to know, if he were watching at all or could see, that his father was still here, still calling. He hesitated at the telephone, and he knew it was the last call. He wanted it to be right. He dialed the numbers very slowly, his eyes fixed on the lights of Levuka at the foot of the hill from him. This little town that had kept his family for nearly 200 years. As a voice came over the line, the number you are trying to call is not available. Please hold while your call is diverted. He held the line until it clicked. Then he stood to walk to the mahogany table in the next room. So that'll be it. So thank you, Tarisi. So that's the beginning of the short story I just wanted to say. And if you look at it, the man, the father decides to do this because his son has been killed 3 years before. And I decided to read this to demonstrate how sometimes we can pick a story or to work it in order to navigate a difficult subject. So for me, I had spent a couple of years really going through the process of how we in Fiji were losing young men through police brutality at the time. So that was a difficult time, I know, for many people. And what the short story does cover is this, that not all policemen are negative or bad, and people do different things under different political systems. That's one. The second thing is we had a lot of young boys or younger men who were being taken into for questioning, but who were not making it out alive. And people were not talking about it. We couldn't at the time. And so the question I always had in mind, and this is why I'm saying, to be a writer, you need to pay more attention to the world. And usually the things that upset you or the things that drive you are the things that you cannot control, that are beyond your control and really impact you as a person. So for me, I'm married to, my husband is from Talanoa. He's from the village of Nandaro. And I was more concerned about the kind of a life that my nephews would live. That, if they're found in the wrong place at the wrong time, anything could happen. You couldn't say that anyone would be safe. Even being Itoke doesn't make you safe. Being any race doesn't make you safe. So my way of speaking to the issue was to write the story to myself. It was important that I did that. And I did that through asking this question. These young people are dying. What happens to their fathers? What happens to their mothers? What happens to the families they leave behind, So sometimes it's questions like that can make you bring out a powerful story. Or things that can, so I would say you pay attention to the things that upset you in life as well, because these are the things that can really make you write something. And then I think the most important thing I wanted to demonstrate is we don't have to write about fancy things, If you look at the story, I'm talking about the 199 steps in Levuka. I'm talking about a normal living room in a house and a normal dining room. There's nothing fancy about it. I'm talking about the smell of soap powder, that the man has used to wash his clothes. And I'm talking about laundry, in describing Levuka. And then, of course, Levuka's main feature is the tuna cannery. And it stinks from time to time. So that has to come in because that authenticates the place and makes it real. So this is what I wanted to share. If you're beginning to write, pay more attention to the street, the houses in your street, the buses that come and take you up and down. And if you pay attention on a bus, there are people who only like certain seats. They have it marked. So these are the things that make us, funny as human beings. So begin with that. Don't begin with anything, really out there. Just talk about the world around you. Tarisi, that's it. Sorry.
And Mary Vinaka vakalevu. Luisa Lotu, she says, by listening to you just now, she wants to go to Levuka.
And she can guarantee finding all those places in there. Yeah.
Vinaka vakalevu. Mary Senivatu, Tavuto, my cousin who lives in Kenya. She's listening into Talanoa. Of course, we were all in foundation together.
Okay.
And then
Yes.
after that, we went in different places. So she remembered you, Ella, and Meriteto.
Thank you.
And thank you for telling us about your bus rides and all of that. I just love the simplicity, right, of what you're just sharing with us. Like as you said, you don't have to start with something so grand, something so small, like going down to the market and talking to people. And you said the side streets and the things like it's just marvelous. Vinaka Mary for
Thank you, Tarisi.
giving us your time. It's so valuable. You're part of this residency. So we just want to say Vinaka vakalevu to your program in Iowa, that you can be able to spend time with me and our friends who are all just wonderfully excited to hear our Talanoa. And Vinaka vakalevu to everybody who've left your comments. And I'm sure Mary will take some time, maybe tomorrow or over the weekend. Well, it's weekend for us. Here still it's Sunday, right?
Yes.
And she's going to pick up before she goes to New York, hopefully, to go through some of the comments. Really, some people who know you from Levuka, some were your junior students at Levuka Public.
Oh my goodness.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's so the mixture of people in this program. Mary, anything else you want to share? Your last comments before we conclude.
Yeah, I think the last comments I want to make, I know that in Fiji we're a very Christian country, and I wanted to say, whatever your faith or denomination is, hold on to that fast, because that's one of the things that keep you grounded, And I also wanted to add that if you don't belong to the Christian faith, if you follow Islam or Hinduism, it's equally the same, And the other thing is, what makes us unique in the Pacific is both our colonial and recent, upheaval experiences as well. But it totally depends on us as individuals to contribute to making, to building this new country that we have. And we can begin from any point. So that would be the things to leave you with. And like I said, the other thing, Tarisi, I wanted to thank you for your platform. Yes. I hope that, I know you have an incredible impact with local people and also Fijians in diaspora, working and living in other countries. And the last thing is, I'll always emphasize this, after coming to Iowa and seeing the books and writers that go through this university and this incredible global writing program, you don't have to begin with English, begin with your own language. You have universities and writing programs around the world that will champion the translation for you. And so I just wanted to leave it with that. Don't think of English as the first language to go by. Begin with your own if you have to.
And what a wonderful way, Leo sama Maranikua. What a wonderful way to, end this Talanoa today, and emphasizing, going back to our indigenous languages, whether you're a Tuman, whether you speak Hindustani, whether we speak Urdu or Intauke, and even in our dialects. That was something that, our friend Simone Sevundrende has been really championing in most of his work, highlighting the importance of our dialects. Like as you said, you can speak the Koro dialect. Isn't that beautiful? And we went to Levuka, and your sound when you're speaking is sounding
Yes,
like,
yes.
the way they speak in Koro. So Vinaka vakalevu, Mary, for sharing your words of wisdom with us. We wish you all the very best with the remaining weeks you have in Iowa, and all the very best with your trip to New York. And keep us posted. And I hope to see you before you fly off to Fiji. Hopefully, you can come by my
I hope
side.
so. I hope so too. Yes.
Yeah, Vinaka
Thank you for that.
vakalevu, and all the very best, Mary.
Right. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Vinaka vakalevu. To everybody logging in from the UK, from Australia, from the Middle East, from New Zealand. And here in the US is quite a lot of our US viewers, and also in Africa. My cousin Merseni logging in from Kenya. Vinaka vakalevu, Tavale for listening in. We really appreciate you. Luisa Lotu, Vinaka vakalevu. Eunice Wong, thank you for joining us as well. And since most of you came late, which was not surprising, because I want to apologize because we had to change the times a few times, Mary, because of
Yeah.
our schedules. I was thinking I would give them a little treat of listening to Jimmy Subaidas one more time. Yeah, I just love this man, his beautiful voice. And if anybody in Levuka meets Jimmy Subaidas Maturanganaita, tell him I love his voice, and I would love to interview him too on my program. So that will end our program, in which we're going to travel to the beautiful island of Ovalau, to the old capital of Fiji, Levuka. I know you will enjoy this.
Vakalevu kana au nono matu na ke na ve lasa ke na ugo tumai era baby na Veisina que levuka Veiva tuloa Kakoro makawa Sevana veibiau Keiviti eloma Now bandu mutu na kena dakali nino wakama e makare tu pe awongo na no elevuka enano mongutu aurai talesu erui kami tandina veya veiva tuloa Kakoro makawa Sevana veibiau Keiviti eloma Nau bandu kumutu Na kena dakaulali Nino wakama
Sa totoko bako tina seroya totoko na tumoy turang na ita Jimmy Subayda sa babi ni binaksar chuka ni bakalewi kem ni todok sar na bakrong main ni Rubita Talanoa kay Mary Rokonadravu. Pero sa bako madiani bikim ni todok sar binak bakalewi na nomni semra main ni Rubita Talanoa ena kay binakani ko sa bako ni binakatuyan bikim ni todoko ena garabitabi ena tipuno ni siya matikumikini. Binak bakalewi Mary kalau ngata na nomu wing garabiti ko may na puno to toko ayawa ke na votan ni bima da sa votin go ni bera ni lista leviti asaba ko mariani ni mari taka
Vinaka.
ade